There was once a man who visited his friend in a far-off town once a year. And when he arrived one year, he was shocked to find a towering tree in his friend's backyard, standing well over 60 feet tall. Most puzzling, though, was the fact that just last year, there had been no trace of such a tree, not as much as a small sapling. Perplexed, he asked his friend, "I was just here a year ago, and this tree wasn't here. What happened? Did you plant a fully grown tree in your yard?" His friend smiled and explained, "This is the Chinese bamboo tree, a very rare and unique tree. Once you plant it, you have to water it every day and make sure it has adequate sunlight. If you miss even a single day, the seed will die. And for 5 whole years, you have to tend to the plant diligently, without seeing a single inch of growth for your efforts. But once you've cared for the seed for 5 years, the tree grows at an accelerated rate, expanding exponentially over the course of just a few months to a staggering height of over 60 feet. And the man was shocked to hear this. And as he and his friend walked away, he began to ponder the meaning of this strange tree. He eventually asked out loud, "Does the tree take 5 months to grow, or 5 years?" Now, in Parshas Vayigash, Yaakov is finally reunited with Yosef after 22 years of separation. In what can only be imagined as an intensely emotional scene, Yaakov embraces Yosef, sobbing on his neck. And Rashi quotes the Midrash explaining that as Yaakov embraced Yosef for the first time in 22 years, he was saying Kriya Shema. So what's the meaning of this? Why not wait until after this joyful and emotional reunion with his long-lost son to pray? And the answer that's often given is that Yaakov was overcome by intense emotion and wanted to channel this emotion towards Hashem through reciting Kriya Shema. However, there may be a deeper layer here as well. This practice of reciting Shema at seemingly puzzling moments occurs once again in Parshas Vayechi. Before Yaakov's death, he gathers his children to his bedside and attempts to tell them when and how Mashiach, the ultimate redemption, will eventually come. However, as the Gemara explains, at this very moment Yaakov lost access to his nevuah, his prophecy, and was unable to reveal the secret. And when this happened, he was gripped by fear, worried that perhaps his inability to share his prophetic knowledge was due to a spiritual deficiency in one of his children. Perhaps one of his children was not worthy of receiving this information. Immediately, in order to relieve this concern, the Shvatim, the tribes, declared in unison, "Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad." Only after this declaration did Yaakov understand that his inability to see the Ketz Hayamim, the days of Mashiach, was not due to a lack in his children, but rather because Hashem didn't want to reveal these secrets at this point in time. And Yaakov then proclaimed out loud, "Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Li'olam Va'ed." So what's the meaning of this whole exchange? How did the brothers alleviate Yaakov's concerns by reciting Shema? How did this prove that there was no lack in his children? So in order to address these questions, let's delve into the spiritual concepts of seeing and hearing. The spiritual concept of seeing is the idea of observing something as it is, in a completely static state, lacking any movement. When you see a picture, you grasp the entire image instantaneously. There's no process of constructing or building the picture in your mind. Everything is just there at once without any effort. The spiritual concept of hearing, in comparison, reflects a process of movement through time, an evolutionary progression, one of effort, concentration, and organization of parts. When you hear someone else speaking, you have to collect all the pieces of sound together and then reconstruct them into a connected picture within your mind so that you can grasp their inner meaning. Hearing is a process of creating oneness out of fragmented parts. When you listen to someone talk, one word by itself lacks meaning and is forgotten. If you hear another few words, it still means nothing and fades to memory. The words from the past exist in a pool of knowledge and memory in your mind. You wait until the end of the sentence to give shape and meaning to the pool of words which created that sentence. And when you finally finish listening to the sentence, you must then reach back into your memory and look at the sentence as a whole, because only then does it gain meaning and clarity. Speech exists only within time, when there's a sequence of one word after another. If someone spoke all the words at once, you wouldn't hear anything, it would just be noise. So listening entails gathering disparate pieces into oneness, which is why the word Shema, which means listen, also means to gather, as we see in the pasuk, which says, "Vayishama Shaul es ha'am." that Shaul gathered the nation. This doesn't mean that Shaul heard the nation before war. It means that he gathered the nation before war to prepare for battle. In addition to static versus process and clarity versus creating clarity, there are several other fundamental differences between the concepts of seeing and hearing. Seeing is more reliable, while hearing is always questionable. This is why the Hebrew word for seeing, re'iyah, shares the same root with the word for proof, ra'ayah. Witnesses have to see an event with their own eyes. Hearing isn't enough, or at least doesn't carry the same weight. As the saying goes, seeing is believing. When you see something, it's far more convincing than hearing about it. And furthermore, seeing occurs outside of oneself. In other words, your experience of sight is perceived as something external, not something occurring within you. If you look at someone, you don't perceive them to be inside of you, rather to be outside of you. Hearing, on the other hand, is something which you perceive as taking place within you. Let's try to explain this. Hearing is a very difficult process. It requires memory and reconstruction of many different parts. It takes place within you. You have to put the words together yourself, one small fragment at a time. When you're listening, words are received in small pieces, and you need to reconstruct it inside your head. You recall the fragments and create the picture or sentence inside of your head. And this is why hearing is so subjective, because each person is reconstructing their own picture within their own mind. And this is, of course, why no two people ever hear the same thing. If you've ever been to a lecture with a friend, you know that you usually come out with different perceptions. And this is because during the reconstruction phase, we project our own worldviews and perceptions onto the words that we're trying to reconstruct. We therefore end up reconstructing what we think the person said or meant, instead of reconstructing what was actually meant by the original speaker. This is also why so many mistakes can occur during the learning process. The goal of hearing and learning is to get past the words that are being spoken and to get back to the inner meaning behind them. You might think that a word refers to one thing while the speaker uses that very same word for something else entirely. Genuine listening requires negating our own ego and ownership over truth and understanding what the speaker truly means. This is true of all forms of communication, especially in relationships. And we can now return to our original questions. Why did Yaakov recite Shema as he embraced Yosef instead of fully experiencing this emotional reunion? The answer is that he did fully experience this emotional reunion precisely through his recitation of Shema. Shema represents the concept of process, of hearing in the darkness, of recognizing that one day all the pieces will come together. By saying Shema, Yaakov was expressing his recognition that all the years of darkness and pain that he experienced were ultimately leading him towards this moment of revelation and clarity. And this also explains why the brothers responded to Yaakov by proclaiming Shema. To eliminate Yaakov's concerns, they declared in unison, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Only after this declaration did Yaakov understand that his inability to see the Ketz Hayamim, the end of days, was not due to a lack in his children, but rather because Hashem didn't want to reveal these secrets at this point in time. But once again, how did the Shvatim eliminate Yaakov's concern by reciting Shema? It's because Shema represents the idea of creating oneness out of disparate parts. Just like listening involves gathering all the different words and pieces into a collective whole. At first, Yaakov was concerned that there was a lack in his children as individuals, but this concern was alleviated once he was assured of their spiritual purity. However, even once it was clear to him that there was no lack in his children, he thought that perhaps they were only pure as individuals, but not as a unit, as a collective whole. In other words, maybe they were 12 independent and separate Shvatim, separate tribes, unable to unite and harmonize as a single cohesive unit. The brothers therefore proclaimed Shema Yisrael. We, the 12 Shvatim of Klal Yisrael, are united as a collective whole. Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Just like Hashem is absolute oneness, so too we are a single nation, a collective whole. And with this, it became clear that Yaakov didn't lose his prophecy due to a lack in his children as individuals or due to a lack in their unity, but rather that Hashem had chosen not to reveal these secrets at this point in time. The question is, why did Hashem not want the Shvatim to know the timing and details of Mashiach? Hashem didn't want to eliminate our free will. He wanted us to live in a world where we have to listen, to hear in the darkness, to build towards Mashiach without knowing when, where, or how it's going to take place, to embark on a genuine journey of Shema Yisrael. And our life is like the Chinese bamboo tree. This unique tree spends years in darkness, accomplishing what seems to be very little, lost in the void. Years go by, and all investment towards its growth appears to be in vain. Only with belief and undying trust can one get through this phase of darkness. Because then, when all hope seems lost, it suddenly skyrockets towards its true towering height, out in the light for all to see. Only then, once it arrives at its full figure, does everything become clear. At that moment, one realizes that it didn't take 5 months for the tree to grow. It took 5 years. And the same is true with Klal Yisrael. One day we're going to see how centuries of tragedy were actually bringing us closer and closer to our ultimate destination. And the same is true for each of us. We have to be willing to listen in the dark, to see past the surface. We have to ride the waves of hardship and challenge, recognizing them as opportunities to grow. Because one day we will see clearly. We will recognize the why behind every what. But until then, we have to learn to listen, to believe, to have faith. For only one who listens will one day truly see.